Today we are surrounded by sex symbols. Sex symbols are as common as taxes and oxygen. It wasn't always that way. Once upon a time we went without. Oh, we still had taxes and oxygen, but no sex symbols. We sure got the worst of that deal. Of course, there were legendary beauties from antiquity, Helens of Troy and Cleopatras, who were as much poetry as people. Imagination, not flesh and blood. Real-life sex symbols had to wait until photography. You gotta see for yourself before declaring anyone a sex symbol. When judging beauties, you can only trust your own eyes. Finally, in the 1840s, photography was invented. Now the true images of famous beauties could be collected, and they were. Now the question was how to market these visions of beauty. Testosterone-drenched, red-blooded Americans would certainly pay a few pennies to ogle a famous French beauty, just as romantically inclined Pierres, Ottos, and Nevilles all over Europe would give their francs, Deutschmarks, and pounds to eyeball the women that made the Wild West wild. How to get these photos into those sweaty hands. Newspapers or books hadn't yet learned how to print pictures. The OG solution for the vital cheesecake distribution to an eager, appreciative audience were postcards, tobacco cards, and stereoscopes. Postcards were just that, available for purchase at stores everywhere. Tobacco cards were pictures printed on the cardboard squares used to add stiffness to flimsy tobacco packages. Pipe tobacco, loose leaf, and cigars only, as factory-made cigarettes won't be invented until the First World War. The first baseball cards were tobacco cards. Stereoscope images were two photos shot at the same time by a special camera using two lenses a precise distance apart. When the dual image is viewed through the stereoscope device, the two images appeared to be a single three-dimensional image. The distribution for cards and stereoscope fell into place around 1870. Now men everywhere could pass judgment on famous beauties and lust after their favorite. The age of global sex symbols had begun. Beautiful singers, actresses, and royalty were the favorite subjects of the early photographers, and therefore became the very first sex symbols. I'd like to take this opportunity to say that it is wrong to objectify women. It devalues their personhood. It undermines their equality. To rank women 1 through 5 based on beauty is even worse. Anyone doing so should be condemned in the strongest terms. Shame on you. Shame, shame, shame.
Shame. Shame. Shame.
Moving right along, here are my rankings for the 5 sexiest babes of the 1870s. Number 5, Sarah Bernhardt. The divine Sarah was the greatest actress of her time. Legendary and aloof, slender with a bohemian style all her own. Possibly the most famous woman in the world, renowned for both her acting and for her many torrid romantic flings with great men, such as writer Victor Hugo and the Prince of Wales, later to be King Edward VII. The Buffalo, New York newspaper every Saturday describes Sarah Bernhardt in 1879 like this. She is a woman of talent, has a melodious, sometimes husky voice, and a pair of fine eyes, which seem to consume the attenuated visage in which they are set. One of her charms is that she is utterly unlike every other fair charmer of the French stage, and stands apart from all of them. It was considered that the line of beauty lay in the gentle curve until Sarah Bernhardt taught that a skeleton might compete for the girdle of Venus. Her clothes drape her like a winding sheet. That same year, the New York City Daily Herald also considered it newsworthy to discuss Sarah Bernhardt's attractiveness. Tall, thin, and straight, and exhibiting none of the plumpness of the woman, Fair in complexion, with a mouth full of promise, sensual lips, and eyes with wonderful expressiveness, Sarah Bernhardt is a charmer in the fullest sense of the word. She sheds around her an atmosphere of incomparable attraction. She not merely knows how to draw people within the circle of her fascinations, but to hold them there. Her voice is one of the gentlest and most caressing that it is possible to hear. A critic said of her, she recites verse just as the nightingale sings. She herself is the muse of poetry. Number 4. Lydia Thompson. Like Sarah Bernhardt, Lydia Thompson was famous for her work on the stage. That is all they had in common. Lydia had been a professional dancer in Europe, but the version of Lydia that caused the stirring among the menfolk was Lydia Thompson and her British Blondes, an English burlesque troupe that took the New York theater scene by storm in 1868 and 1869. Lydia and her troupe of fit young women, with supporting cast, presented a fast-moving, light-hearted variety show made up of songs, dances, pantomimes, playlets, and more. The blondes were risque for the times. Cross-dressing and women presented as superior to men broke social taboos. But mostly, it was the tights. The British blondes showed lots and lots of leg, albeit under tights, in an era when the flash of a female ankle would raise the temperature of every male in the room. The tights got the men into the theater. The fast-paced, funny, titillating show kept them coming back. After conquering New York, Lydia and company began a successful tour, playing all over the United States for the next 7 years. Many young Midwestern corn-fed farm boys became men upon the sight of Lydia Thompson and her almost naked legs. In 1871, the Charleston, South Carolina Daily News said of Lydia, "She shines forth alone in her golden hair, gorgeous and resplendent, and all the other blondes pale out of sight when she is on stage." Number 3. Empress Elizabeth of Austria, Sisi. Something about royal princesses that both men and women find fascinating. And when a princess comes along who is absolutely, stunningly gorgeous, everybody sits up and takes notice. The Empress Elizabeth of Austria, known to her friends as Sisi, was that rare, high-born stunner who turned crowned and uncrowned heads wherever she went. In a time where unrest, hostility, and indifference were directed towards the monarchy by the Austro-Hungarian people, Sisi's beauty and the fairy tale wedding to Emperor Franz Joseph was meant to renew interest in the monarchy, and it worked. Sisi was aware of her responsibility and followed a very disciplined beauty regimen. The Empress had a strict diet and exercised daily in her custom-built gymnasium. Sisi spent 3 hours a day having her ankle-length chestnut hair styled, and an hour each day being corseted to achieve her 19.5-inch waistline. While her beauty had caught her empire's attention, it was Sisi's compassion that won their hearts. Sisi would appear unannounced at hospitals and charity wards to visit and talk with the dying and the ill, holding their hands and treating them as equals. Any poor sick lout who received sincere compassion from his queen, a vision of loveliness, would love her. So would his family and all of his friends. Sisi's mother-in-law, the Archduchess Sophie, wrote, "It is the Empress who attracts them all, for she is their joy, their idol." Number 2. Lotta Crabtree. Lotta Crabtree, actress, singer, dancer, was the girl next door high school girlfriend to America. Oh, she rebelled. She would wear pants and smoke cigars. But it only made her cuter. In the 1870s, Lotta was one of Broadway's greatest and highest paid stars. In the 1850s, Lotta toured the mining camps outside of San Francisco where she, 8 years old, would perform songs and dances her mother taught her for the entertainment of the miners. This enthusiastic little girl in their midst would send lonely miners' sentimental minds back home to their own families. And through a tear or two, they would toss gold nuggets onto the crude stage to the dancing, smiling little red-headed girl who made them feel nostalgic and happy and sad all at once. After Lotta gained enough nuggets, she moved to San Francisco and began performing in San Francisco theaters. In those days, minstrel shows were all the rage. As Lotta worked with seasoned minstrels, she perfected her singing and dancing, as well as becoming a banjo virtuoso. In San Francisco, Lotta developed the skills and stage presence that would make her the toast of Broadway. Lotta's youthful beauty never seemed to fade. One critic from the Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania Times Leader newspaper incredulously commented on Lotta's seemingly eternal youth in 1879. Lotta Crabtree is the real name of the little actress who plays here this week. Her first appearance was at the old Fuller Opera House in 1866. She was then 17 years old. She is now about 18. Lotta's popularity and attractiveness made her private life of interest, as when the Daily Memphis Avalanche reported this item. The sprightly kitten Lotta Crabtree disports like a duck in the ocean surf at Cape May and beats all of the boys at swimming. But Lotta was mostly loved because of the uplifting nature of her performances. This little lady put on a monster of a show. The Brooklyn Daily Eagle reviewed her like this in 1874. Everybody likes Lotta, and everybody goes to see Lotta once or twice a year. Her girlish simplicity, her unexhaustible fund of good spirits and harmlessly mischievous ways, her own childlike enjoyment of her own fun and of other people's appreciation of it are always delightful to see. The fascinating little nymph loses nothing with the passage of time. And, drum roll please, number 1, Georgiana Elizabeth Ward, the Countess of Dudley. A young beauty of 18 years old when she married 48-year-old wealthy landowner Lord Dudley in the summer of 1865. The newspapers went crazy for her, and she did not shrink from the spotlight. Newspaper stories about the other women in this list are a little coy about calling out the attractiveness of each of them. They point out Sarah's lack of curves, play up Lotta's youth, calling her sprightly kitten and little nymph without detailed description. Newspapers treat Empress Cece with royal respect. Blushing critics totally steer away from Lydia Thompson's constantly displayed lustful limbs. With Georgiana Ward, newspapers fondly describe in detail her unmatched magnetism and beauty. They need us to know that, as a matter of undisputable fact, Georgiana Ward was the absolutely most beautiful woman in every room she ever set foot in. For example, the Chicago Tribune reported in 1877, "The latest to arrive was the Countess of Dudley, considered the handsomest peeress in Great Britain. A tall, stately, and fair creature of some 30 summers, with auburn hair, delicate features, and violet eyes." In the Worcester Journal, Worcestershire, England, in 1879, a London reporter wrote that an important debate in the House of Lords about the Zulu War was disrupted by the appearance of a group of royal princesses in the viewing gallery. The Duchess of Connaught made her first public appearance as a bride, and for some time was the principal object of interest in the assembly, even to the exclusion of the topic of the debate. She had for companion the Duchess of Edinburgh, and of the party was the Duchess of Teck. The princess had the disadvantage of immediate contiguity of the Countess of Dudley, who laughed and chatted and flashed two solitaire diamonds she wore as earrings. If it is not rude to say so, made the royal princesses look by comparison ordinary personages. In her obituary, the Times of London felt it necessary to note, "Her loveliness was something quite apart. Her exquisitely shaped and poised head, her flower-like complexion, her matchlessly beautiful eyes, her dignity of carriage, even in early youth, made her fame to ring through Europe. At Compiègne, the Empress Eugenie and her court, which consisted of all that was fair in France, confessed themselves completely outshone. In Vienna, the crowds gathered in the plaza to watch the imperial carriage pass. To and fro admitted that their hitherto peerless empress paled before the English woman seated by her side. We know that Empress as our number 3 beauty, Sisi. To bring this list full circle, in 1879, our number 1 beauty, Georgiana, her husband, the Earl, suffered a stroke on the very night they were to host a poetry reading by our number 5 beauty, Sarah Bernhardt. Proof that this list was destined to be 100% for sure. Or maybe not. If you think I missed a fascinating beauty from the 1870s, let me know in the comment below. If you guys come up with 2 or 3 I missed, I'll revise the list. I'm not busy or proud.